You know, guys, this one's actually quite sad. So, the cancelled Time Splitters game from Embracer was going to be a battle royale, at least according to the headlines taken from an interview with a ex-developer. But the truth actually may be a bit more complex. It may in fact reveal a production that seems to have been trying to pull the long con on their game, right? Seems they were trying to do that. Of course, though, they were shut down before they got a chance to show their work. And today, I'm going to take you through the whole thing, from the pre-Christmas closure of Free Radical, the absolutely heartbreakingly good in-development work that the artist showed off, and the story behind the Time Splitters Battle Royale that allegedly was never going to be finished because the leadership actually planned to lead Embracer into paying for a Time Splitters 2 remake, just like how I'm leading you to one or two things I want to say. So we've got big plans to push forward what we're doing with this show in 2024. And actually not just with this show, because over at bellular.ghost.io, our members, they're getting early access to videos as soon as they're made, as well as Loading Screen, which is our 5-day-a-week newsletter. One of the things I'd actually love to do with that is turn it into its own, even daily podcast, as an example. So we're pushing to make better and better content for you, and if you'd like to support us in doing that, and it really does help us actually do things, and you'll of course get a lot of exclusive content in return, and you'll be able to hang out with us in the Members Lounge Discord, then hit up bellular.ghost.io. And yeah, we're working on getting the URL fixed. Okay, let's get into the video. The starting point here is that, at least after meeting some legal obligations, Embracer's Play-On division has basically said, yeah, Free Radical is the next studio that's gone, that's dead. Another group who have suffered because of the Embracer Group. If you're not aware, here's the rapid TLDR. Embracer Group were hoovering up studios left, right, and center, to the point where they even had, let's just say, an acquisitions individual talk to us for our studio. They were everywhere, man, seriously. And basically they had a deal worth $2 billion from Savvy Games Group, who I believe are like, you know, state money in Saudi, I think. That fell through, $2 billion disappeared, and now everyone is on the chopping block, and it's been goddamn brutal. So, yeah, the studio is gone. This followed posts from Free Radical staff suggesting that they had been closed only weeks before Christmas, with even the company website being shut down. Here's somebody saying, my last day at Free Radical Design was different from what I imagine. I don't think it's sunk in properly just yet, which is goddamn sad to see. Now, staff were quick to link this then to the wider trend at the Embracer Group, and of course the industry at large, because be it money from Savvy Games Group or elsewhere, a lot of those, like 0% interest, money's free and doesn't even exist, a lot of that has basically dried up hardcore. Quote, Free Radical Design was always a hub of creativity, but sadly we join an ever-growing list of casualties in a broken industry where entire studios are treated as replaceable cogs in a soulless machine fixated on nothing but share prices. Yeah, that's how it makes them feel as developers, and I'm sure that is how some business models, live service games, and stuff like that has made you feel as a customer. It ain't working for devs, it ain't working for us, something's got to change. Now, one positive, and certainly for the careers of the artists involved, is they've been able to show off their work, right? Can make it into their portfolios. And I've got to say, man, a lot of this really does look quite gorgeous. Those assets, man, they're looking pretty damn crisp. Taking a look, you know, various different guns, all the things you would expect from Time Splitters and its characters. And then, one of the biggest sets of data is from a 3D modeler called Alfred Turner, whose portfolio is really just quite sad to see if you're maybe a classic Time Splitters fan, because you straight up see what the old characters look like, what the new characters look like. And broadly speaking, I think they're looking real damn good. Yes, obviously it's not the sort of, you know, polygons and, you know, etc. of the past, but there are some things that only really would sort of work at the way that we were presenting games with the technology we had in the past. So doing these things in the modern day, it is quite hard. It is quite a lot of work. I think the best example of that being done is probably Spyro Reignited, but certainly a lot of strong stuff here. But some of these designs correspond with an interview given after the closure of Free Radical to Free Radical Wiki. Now, here we can compare the released artwork for an unreleased project with a sci-fi female lead to Corporal Heart from Time Splitters Future Perfect. I mean, it's pretty damn obvious, right? Isn't it? If you were going to update a character to look a little bit more distinct, less polygonal, you know, then it would look like something like this. keep that in mind. It's going to be relevant. So now we get to the interview, and this is a fascinating thing. Essentially, the fan wiki that this interview was given to took as their verification of veracity that the individual involved could basically independently provide them with new, unique like models and images and things like that were definitely, or at least from their computer, but they did not literally, were not literally copies of images, etc., that had been published online. So that's basically what they rolled with. What I will say is that these allegations are absolutely fascinating. If you are formerly a Free Radical developer and you want to reach out to us, then you can check out the email tips@bellular.games. If you maybe feel that there's some more information that you'd like to add to this story, anything you want to confirm, anything you want to deny, any parts of your story that you think the people would be interested in knowing, that might kind of reveal the sorts of things that are actually going on here. Now, the big ticket item basically turns up pretty late in this interview. The game was still, at the time of closure, 2 years away from completion minimum. A part of the long development cycle is because they moved from UE4 to UE5, and they committed to doing that move basically as soon as Unreal Engine 5 was launched. This allegedly caused a lot of issues to their development pipeline. The framing here is given that most of the art, including the stuff provided that we've already talked about today, that stuff was made in the last 12 months of development, and then prior to that, the team was basically just using, assets, right? So, gray boxing things, maybe using store assets, that sort of thing, which is often how a lot of gameplay prototyping can and should be done, because you don't want to pull the very expensive "let's do the art now" lever until you actually know that art is going to be something that you can use. Now, beyond that, it gets more fascinating when it turns out that the game basically had a big pivot within the last 12 months, because the actual core of the game changed in March 2023, turning into a remake of Timesplitters 2, but with an alternative narrative and some unique elements. So essentially trying to really play with what the franchise is, which I thought was pretty cool. Prior to this, though, per the person involved, it was a Fortnite clone. A free-to-play battle royale designed as a live service. The quote from the interview is, "Nobody wanted that, really, not even us, but we didn't have much choice for a long time." Now, this is a notable thing because Embracer don't traditionally do live service titles. I mean, a lot of what they've traded on with their publications have been remakes, remasters, kind of reviving older IPs, doing things at a modest cost control budget where they can have modest but profitable returns. So this would have been a fairly massive departure, but from a pitching perspective, it makes complete sense. So, long before the days of Fortnite, Timesplitters was known as the multiplayer game that had dozens of excellent character skins and modes alongside map building tools that were leaps ahead of what anyone else was offering, especially on console. I don't think it was much of, the PC gamers weren't really as familiar or whatever, but certainly segments of the console base, they lived and died Timesplitters. This was a game that was humongously played, often at friends' houses, that sort of thing. So to a publisher, you've got legacy IP that a lot of people love. It already has some elements with the skins, etc., that could be applied to a live service, and perhaps Embracer, being very focused on business with all their M&A, would like to have some sort of game like this, that obviously could be a cash cow, with all those lovely buzzwords that we all want, like microtransactions, character skins, and of course, user-generated content, because looking at the future of Fortnite or Roblox, UGC, user-generated content, is all what those companies are about. To go to the interview, characters and skins were microtransactions, at least that was the plan, but there was debate over what would be offered as standard, what was purchasable, but for the sake of the publisher, we showed everything as purchasable. Ouch. So, how does a game end up in this situation, where it's basically greenlit as a free-to-play battle royale featuring one of the more cult gaming brands out there, to being like an actual proper, video game? How does that happen? Well, the implication of this article is fascinating. It basically alleges that this is a long play from the leadership of Free Radical. That's crazy. Basically them getting their feet under the table and having PlayOn sink the early investment in, only to then end up changing things. This is crazy. I'll read from the interview. How did the directors react to the Battle Royale concept? Quote, "I think Steve pitched the Battle Royale to them in order to get greenlit. I'm not convinced it was ever his goal." Then the interviewee goes on to say that Dave, one of the studio directors, ended up spending a lot more time on narrative later on. So you can sort of see how that would kind of work. Quote, "What made the team move away from a Battle Royale concept? I personally think Steve never intended to release a battle royale. He always intended to get the funding and the interest first and deviate once the investment was there. I could be wrong though, he's a hard man to read. And after being prompted, we then learn, quote, yep, he and basically everyone stopped and spent a couple of weeks throwing together the dam and a campaign mode with some semblance of a quest line to follow in order to demonstrate the power of a linear game and how quickly we could put levels together. So basically, right, they were kind of like, hey, Deep Silver, you want a battle royale? They're like, okay, we got the battle royale money. Let's do all of our basic building, and then we will inform them it's no longer a battle royale somehow. To be honest, this does seem like a little bit of the old 4D chess. It does seem to be very spicy, salacious, and frankly, a recipe for getting your studio both funded and shut down. I have got to wonder what was going on at the corporate level, at the leadership level. Obviously, this interview is not from that perspective. If true, though, this is a hell of a play, a true moonshot. We've seen legacy IP obviously get revived as live services before. As an example, the developers at EA's Skate, they have said that they wouldn't have been given the IP and the funds to build the studio unless they pitched the game as such. But there is a certain sense to all of this, as well as that eventual pivot, effectively telling Embracer they couldn't deliver the dream live service that they promised, but that they could do everything within their power to take what they had built and turn it into a game that people could sell. And think about it from Embracer's perspective, and from their perspective, thinking about what Embracer would think. What does Embracer tend to do? Reasonably cost-controlled remakes of legacy, revival sort of IP. So it would have taken it from a big exciting moonshot into the sort of thing that Embracer does anyway. Maybe that was their plan all along. Kinda daring, and at least I can respect the gumption. Now, going back to our sci-fi female lead model from above, the new version was supposedly a remix of the original Timesplitters 2 with a secondary playable character, Corporal Hart, now being the protagonist rather than Cortez, with some new levels and remixes of maps from the whole series. Basically, it's the most Timesplitteries pitch that you could get. So that's fascinating, but the interviewee doesn't talk about only the game. So, the game is cancelled. The implication here is that the only remaining member of the studio is Steve Ellis, and as far as the interviewee knows, nobody's working the game going forward. So obviously with the studio closing then, there are questions as to what actually caused this and around how a studio that pivoted so much was actually ran. And the answers aren't ideal. They sort of describe a situation with management that reflects the general chaos of game development. I'll just read out. As time went on, it became clear that most of the leads didn't really have a plan, nor did Steve. Some had a bit of a power trip, favorites were played, and some people got royally shafted, leading to a number choosing to leave before the end. I know that goes for a lot of workplaces, but it did become a bit of a recurring theme over the past 12 months. In the beginning, though, it was a lot more relaxed. Less people and ideas were shared freely. We knew it wouldn't be like that forever, but there were some very poor decisions being made and a fair bit of bias in some areas by the end. One of the biggest draws of this Timesplitters announcement was the return of old leadership to the series, and maybe that can lead to some bad habits, some lessons learned from older times, bit of an old boys club forming at the company, which is not good for team cohesion and staff morale. That basically is allegedly what kind of went on here. There were a few people who said to me in multiple occasions that there seemed to be a distinct mentality of, if you're under 30, you know literally nothing, which was hard to disagree with. That attitude did float about a bit. A shame really, most of the younger devs on the team, while fresh out of uni, most of them were full of pretty interesting ideas. Whatever happened though, Embracer ends up killing the studio. Personally, I wonder how much they found out about this. Maybe they will have made financial decisions based on the revenue projections of one type of game. If they're suddenly going to be getting another type of game, they're going to rethink things. And even if they were tenable, whenever it becomes time to trim down because of the Savvy Games deal going through, yeah, you're going to be one of the first on the block if you had a situation like that go down. So overall, it's pretty sad. This is but one allegation from one developer. That being said, we know the studio's gone. We know people have been sharing the work that they did on this Timesplitters project. And as for the team leads not really knowing what to do, obviously they're from an older era of games. Like, they did Timesplitters. They're from an older era. Maybe they were just thinking, how do we get that money in? And then they get the money in, actually shaping that into a project while also not completely torpedoing your relationship with your publisher, because ostensibly you actually don't want to make the game you pitched and you want to make a different game within that IP. I mean, I don't know how you make a relationship like that work in a way that does not lead to a bunch of chaos. Very strange situation. It is sad that Free Radical is gone, and honestly, more Timesplitters would have been a breath of fresh air If it was to be a Battle Royale, I mean, look, how many brand deals does it take for Fortnite to stay on top? There is no way a studio the size of Free Radical will be able to do that sort of thing. There's just no way. They don't have the budget. They don't have the data scientists to help them make the right decisions. You cannot just go and make a live service. It is utter folly unless you know you are making a big multi, tens, maybe 50s, maybe hundreds of millions of dollars bet, right? So I don't know. Seems kind of whack to me. I'd like to know what you think though. So there's that. And I suppose, do you have memories? Do you have good old memories from the old Time Splitters games? I at least have a few. Didn't own it myself. Played it at a friend's house, as I'm sure many of us did. But that's it from me. Check out today's sponsor and that link down below. And with that said, I'll catch you next time.